This is Matthew Cratter from Bitcoin University, and today I wanted to talk about countries competing for Bitcoiners, as well as I wanted to touch on RFK Jr.'s Bitcoin proposal, which has been getting a lot of airtime. Bitcoin game theory and the sovereign individual thesis, if you kind of put these together, you end up with the conclusion that countries will compete with each other to own as much Bitcoin as possible. Countries will also compete to attract Bitcoiners who tend to be some of the smartest and most productive people around. Just like in Lake Wobegon, we're all above average. In addition, after the next few halvings, Bitcoiners will also be some of the wealthiest people around if we're right about what we believe. And so one way to attract Bitcoiners to your country is through good tax policy. We saw this with Slovakia a couple of weeks ago, lowering the tax on Bitcoin capital gains from 39% to 7%. There's been talk that El Salvador would completely eliminate the tax on Bitcoin profits as well for foreign investors. This article is from 2021. I don't know whether this has actually been put into practice, put into law yet, but this is definitely where El Salvador is trending. In April of 2022, Panama passed a law giving Bitcoin legal status, as well as applying zero capital gains taxes to it as well. If you want to read a bit more about countries like this, I'll put a link in the description notes below. Crypto tax-free countries, though they really do mean Bitcoin tax-free. And then in the context of this, we can see RFK Jr.'s proposal to exempt Bitcoin profits from the capital gains tax. So in other words, you would not pay any taxes on Bitcoin holdings. Before we talk about that, I just ask you, if you're enjoying this video so far, to please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Hit the like button and leave a comment as well. So for those of you who haven't been following this, RFK Jr. is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is the son of the former Senator RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and he's the nephew of one of the U.S.'s most famous presidents of all time, John F. Kennedy, who was his uncle. And so he has proposed zero federal tax rate on Bitcoin capital gains if he's elected president. And I do think this is a great way to attract more Bitcoiners to the U.S. and keep the ones that we already have. I think it's also a win for Bitcoin privacy as well, as RFK points out, and this is his quote, "Non-taxable events are unreportable, and that means that it will be more difficult for governments to weaponize currency against free speech, which, as many of you know, is one of my principal objectives." U.S. politicians are waking up to the fact that there is a whole crowd of single-issue voters, which is us Bitcoiners. I like Michael Saylor's poll here. Will you require any presidential candidate to support your right to Bitcoin before they can earn your vote? Approximately 84% of respondents said yes. Only 16% said no. That this is Bitcoin Twitter, so it may be a little bit skewed, but I think this is definitely a trend that we're seeing in U.S. politics and global politics. On the GOP side of things, we have Vivek saying that he is also going to be very friendly to Bitcoin. I don't think he's come out with his tax policy for Bitcoin. We have DeSantis definitely on the side of Bitcoin and against CBDC, central bank digital currencies. And then we have Tulsi Gabbard as well. This was a great podcast with Portal Orange, in which she spoke with John Vallis and American Hodl and Eric Kaysen. And I thought she was quite articulate as well. So this is the context in which we see RFK Jr. saying that he wants to end Bitcoin taxes. He also has this plan to back the US dollar with Bitcoin, which is what I wanted to talk about here as well. His plan would be to start very, very small. This is his quote: "Perhaps 1% of issued T-bills would be backed by hard currency, by gold, by silver, platinum, or Bitcoin." So my comments on this is, the first one would be that 1% of current U.S. public debt, which is about 32 trillion, would be 320 billion, which is currently about 54% of Bitcoin's current total market cap. So it would still take a while to roll 1% of U.S. debt, assuming it was all in T-bills, or the majority of it went in T-bills, into BTC. But let's assume that 1% of debt makes its way into Bitcoin, or the proceeds from the debt is used to purchase Bitcoin. That would have an incredibly bullish effect on Bitcoin's price, because we're talking about a huge amount of money. The market cap of Bitcoin is only about 580 billion, so 320 billion would be huge capital inflows, even if they took a few years. As far as backing the US dollar with gold, I would say that's already been tried. It failed miserably in the late 60s, culminating in Nixon closing the convertibility window in 1971. And in fact, the gold standard unfortunately led directly to the fiat standard. So I'm not too bullish on gold backing anything at this point. Silver and platinum are even worse. They have lower stock to flows. They're less scarce than gold or Bitcoin and thus make much worse money. Platinum doesn't even function as money anymore, and silver has been mostly demonetized by gold. This happened in the late 19th century. Bitcoin is far superior to any of these metals, but backing a currency with Bitcoin does reintroduce all of the problems that the gold standard had with third-party custodians, trusting the government not to print more money than they have gold or Bitcoin backing it, etc. If you're interested in learning more about these issues, I go into them in more depth in my video on the BRICS proposed new gold-backed currency, which I'll link to in the description notes below. That being said, I do agree with the broad outlines of RFK Jr.'s proposal. The U.S. should absolutely be buying Bitcoin and adding it to its balance sheet. I'm sure there are a lot of sovereign nations that are already doing this and have done this. And this would help the U.S. This would help to mitigate the disaster of skyrocketing U.S. debt and money supply. It wouldn't eliminate it unless they bought quite a bit of Bitcoin, but it would definitely help. That being said, don't expect politicians and central bankers to respect any sort of hard asset-backed currency and adhere to its discipline and limitations, especially at the end of the long-term debt cycle as we are now. So I think it's much better to try to force them through our votes and through our behavior and through grassroots movements, to force them to use Bitcoin in its pure state as a standalone digital asset and currency. We don't really need to back the US dollar with it, nor do I think that this will actually happen. For now, politicians will keep spending, central bankers will keep printing up the money to monetize that deficit spending. If some of that printed money goes to putting BTC, putting Bitcoin on the Federal Reserves or the federal government's balance sheets, that's probably one of its highest uses. It's unlikely to see that happen, I would say, in the next 4 years, but we are definitely trending toward having a Bitcoiner as president, and having Bitcoiner politicians run a lot of things. And I would say I definitely prefer to have a Bitcoiner as a president rather than just another empty suit who works for the central bankers. If you scroll out and think about it, it's actually quite amazing that we have so many candidates running for president who are very Bitcoin friendly. We've come a really long way over the past 4 years when you think of US politics and Bitcoin and global politics and Bitcoin. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.